Ladies and gentlemen,
They say the next big thing is
the Steve Warneke Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the program. I am Steve Warneke. Thanks for joining me. Author of From Boy to Blue, everything we do over at stevewarneke.com, and we're on every social media platform available except for Google+, but we're working on that. Lots of big announcements coming this month, so I hope you'll stay tuned. So today's topic I made up, the term at least. It is an actual psychological term. It's called transference, and I used it in the book From Boy to Blue to describe a phenomenon that I see happening between law enforcement and citizens. And it's sort of similar to the psychologist's version of it, but it doesn't matter because in today's world, I'm just taking the word because it's perfect for what I'm trying to describe, and it's now being used for this word. So I'm going to tell you what it is. We'll define it, and then I'm going to give you some examples of it. So when ordinary people hear a police story, I think the first thing that happens is they imagine themselves in that position. So think about a recent high-profile police altercation, the woman who Facebook lived the aftermath of her significant other, I don't think they were married, boyfriend being shot in the car. And there was tidbits we heard about that case. And the tidbits we heard were he was licensed to carry a gun. He informed the officer that he was carrying a gun and was licensed to do so, and then was reaching for his driver's license, according to the tidbits we heard, when he was shot. And everybody goes, what if that was me? I reached for my license when I get pulled over. So what if I get shot when I reach for my license? Are you kidding me? This is out of control. These cops are out of control. What the, I'm reaching for the license. You're going to shoot me now? We always place ourselves or our loved ones into that scenario. That's what I call transference. But it's not an appropriate imagination in these circumstances. Let me talk to you about just a few of the things, just a couple of them that happened over my 15-plus year career for illustration purposes. This first one happened all the time. We would have somebody at gunpoint who was either potentially armed or is a felon. We're trying to get them into custody. And they would say, "You ain't gonna shoot me? You ain't gonna shoot me?" And they wouldn't do what you're gonna say. They literally could care less. You're pointing a gun at them. All the time. All the time. That happened all the time. And you end up having to wait for people to get there or trying something else if they're not, posing a imminent threat of serious bodily injury or death. If they're not posing that imminently, then perhaps you have to try something else. But officers do that. We pull over a stolen car. It's commonplace throughout the United States to address the occupants with a drawn firearm because they are felons in the act of committing a felony. So that's how they're dealt with, and I don't think that should go away. When people fight with the police, I think the average citizen thinks it needs to be a fair fight, but it doesn't. Police are not paid to bring fist to a fist fight, a knife to a knife fight. Police are allowed to, by statute, by law that we've all agreed upon by our system of government, to win and win decisively. Police don't bring a knife to a knife fight. They bring a gun to a knife fight. They bring a taser to a fist fight. They bring a baton to a fist fight. You don't have to mano-a-mano this. This isn't what we should expect law enforcement personnel to be doing. I worked off-duty at bars in addition to my 40 hours a week as a police officer. Lots and lots of hours. There were years where I did 3, 4, and 5 nights a week in the bars after my 8-hour shift. I would honestly venture a guess that between off-duty, because I think this happened more at off-duty, that I had somebody attempt to punch me, take a swing at a uniformed policeman attempting to intervene in either an argument, a fight, whatever. People tried to punch me a lot, and we ended up getting in a fight. And I even got hit a few times. especially in the chest plate. I would move and it would like hit me in my bulletproof vest. One time, I had a guy in the back of a police car, and we were questioning him. Wasn't under arrest yet. And my officers weren't really sure. I was a sergeant at the time. My officers weren't really sure what to do with this guy. I opened the door to talk to him, and I had one hand on the car frame and the other hand on the door. And I'm holding the door open, and I'm leaning in to talk to him. Now, he'd already been searched and all that, but he was in the back of the police car. And I'm talking to him for a while, and I kind of, at first I have everything braced like this. And after a while of talking to him, I let my guard down, which was my mistake. I let my guard down for just a couple seconds. And I turned around to ask one of my officers a question that I needed to know before I continued on. And this man, in that moment that I took my hands down, reached over, grabbed the car door, and pulled it shut and slammed me in between the door and the car frame. That happened too, right in front of Coors Field in downtown Denver. I've had a lot of people spit in my face. Some of them with bloody loogies or their mouth is bleeding, and they wait until you get to a point. They've been saving it. You can just tell, and you get close enough and poof, right in your face just to get you back. All right, now I bring that up for a couple of reasons. Not for you to say, oh, poor Steve, we really don't know how you put up with all that. Because I want to ask the majority of you something. I'm sure a couple of you listening to this at some point, maybe you're not the most upstanding citizens, but I'm willing to bet that almost all of you listening to this have never been in a situation and would never conceive of any of those things. You would never dare a police officer to shoot you, defy commands while he has you at gunpoint. You would never openly swing on a uniformed police officer and try to punch him striking first. You wouldn't do it. You would never reach over and grab the car door and slam a uniformed police officer in the car door trying to hurt him. You wouldn't do it. You would not spit in the face of a uniformed police officer. You wouldn't do it. That's my point. The people that you're reading about in a majority of these circumstances have done things like this in order to escalate the event to a point where force is needed. Sometimes to a point where deadly force is needed. But what I submit to you is that you, the average and majority of people, are law-abiding good people and would never get to a point where these stories that are coming in the news, one after another, would happen to you. I mentioned the Facebook shooting. The officer pulled over a guy who, by the way, fit a description of somebody who had potentially been involved in an armed robbery, was high, driving around a vehicle with his girlfriend and kid in the car, and was licensed to carry a gun. I did a podcast on this, so I don't want to go on this entire incident. If you want to listen to that, stevewarneke.com podcast tab and look for it. So I won't go into too much detail, but what I will say is the facts that you heard at the onset of that shooting were a guy was reaching for his wallet and he got shot. That's what you heard, what I recapped at the beginning of this. And then later, the officer was charged. It goes to trial. A jury of his peers hears the entire case. They find the officer not guilty. But it's not until after the trial is over that you get to see the entire dash cam, which was later released from the officer, which does show a different view than what we saw on Facebook. Let me tell you, this honestly happened to me. We were out in high school, sophomore year, with a BB gun shooting at things during lunchtime like a bunch of idiots. Somebody called the cops and said, oh, these kids have a rifle. The cops pulled in behind us, pulled us out at gunpoint, got us on the ground, found the BB gun, and wrote me a ticket for discharging a firearm in city limits because he said, what are you doing with this? I'm like, we're out in the field shooting at bottles and stuff. I didn't reach for the gun. I did exactly like I was taught. Put your arms out the window, open the car door from the outside, get out with your hands up, get down on your knees. I did everything I was told. I didn't go, I'm just going to keep reaching for this. You want to see the gun? Here, let me see. Okay, My point is I followed directions and it ended up okay. I mean, I got a ticket, but it ended up okay. Philando Castillo, who was the man shot in the Facebook video, did not follow directions when the officer said, don't reach for it. In fact, in the dash cam video, he goes, well, don't reach for it, partner. The officer doesn't lose his mind as soon as he finds out the guy's armed. He's actually relatively calm. Well, don't reach for it then. And then he gets really fast within a couple seconds. Don't reach for it, don't reach for it, don't reach for it. And then you have a split second to decide. Another example, 13-year-old boy fatally shot by police in Ohio. We all remember this one. Officers roll up in a park, pull up. The confrontation's really fast. Cops shoot the 13-year-old who was holding a very lifelike BB gun that was similar to the guns the officers carried. Didn't have an orange thing on the end. He used it as a gun. He produced it from his waistband. The officers were going to stop this kid because he fit the description of somebody who just committed an armed robbery with a gun from another person. But all you heard was 13-year-old with a gun shot, and you start to find this other stuff out. Wait a minute, he produced a weapon that looks identical. The police held it up online. It looks identical to the one the officers carry. Produced a weapon. Do you think this guy was a 9-year veteran? Do you honestly believe that this officer got out of bed every morning and was like, I can't wait to shoot a kid today. Hopefully today's my day to shoot a kid. Get out of here with that. Can you imagine what life would be like? You're out serving and protecting and doing your best, and in the course of your day, you perceive a threat. And by the way, a 13-year-old, somebody in the early teens, stabbed 2 cops that I was with. I think he was 13, multiple times. He'd been practicing palming a knife and was punching them. They didn't even know they were being stabbed. He'd been practicing on pumpkins and stuff at home, and he stabbed 2 of the officers I worked with. They both almost died, and he was just a young kid. It's not to say that any 13-year-old... See, people jump to the conclusion that, any 13-year-old with a BB gun should be murdered. It isn't that way. So I posted a video this week of reporters going through decisional shoot activities, and I love when this happens because their perspective really changes. And just listen to a couple clips. I'm just going to play a couple of them of what the reporters had to say after they went through the same scenarios that their officers had to face.
Things that you're going to second guess, but while other people have hours and days and weeks to review body cam footage and dash cam footage, you make that decision right then, right there, and you go with your gut and you do what you think will get you home at night.
That's an interesting perspective from a reporter who didn't go into it thinking that. To leave these scenarios and go, Jesus, I mean, like, you got to decide right then and there in a split second whether or not you're going to go home and see your family. I just thought she said that particularly well. Let's listen to another clip.
I think a lot of people should take these things into consideration, that it is a split second, and you can say, I would have done this or I would have done that, but until you're in that situation, you never know.
That video was courtesy of the Lexington County Sheriff's Department that put that together, and it was great. Not only did they just do that for the media, but they actually put together that video news clip and released it. It has over 10 million views on Facebook. It's on my Facebook page if you haven't seen it. So I just want to say that the perspective thing, this is one of the things that I concentrate on a lot, is perspective, because things change dramatically based on where you are and what you know. And just as the perspective of these reporters can change after going through scenarios that police officers face on a daily basis, so can your perspective change by reading Boy to Blue, by listening to my podcast, by looking at my articles, because this relationship between law enforcement and citizens is important. And I'm repairing it by undoing the misconceptions and misunderstandings. I want to tell you about another incident that happened to me on the job. I got a call of a domestic, and there was lots of yelling and screaming. The neighbors called it in, and I got to the house, and as we typically do, we park a couple houses down, and we walk up quietly. We listen at the door for a minute. I didn't hear anything. I rang the doorbell. Didn't hear or see anything, but it had one of those panes of glass to the side of the doors. It had it was distorted. It's got the bubbles and stuff, so you can't see directly through, but it's kind of like, it's distorted. And I can kind of, if I just hold it just right in the exact right position, and I tell this story in my book, by the way, that you could see fairly clearly, almost like you were looking through a pinhole into the house. And what happened next, I'll never forget. A man came walking out, barely dressed, bleeding, blood all over both arms, holding a long kitchen knife, and he was walking like a zombie. He was staring straight ahead. He was moving very slowly. He'd just take a step, and then another step. Then he'd pause, and then he'd take another step. His eyes were glazed over. We had already rung the doorbell, and he looked over toward the door, and he paused, and then he looked over toward the kitchen, and he ignored the door and walked toward the kitchen. I was 100% convinced at that moment that he had killed his wife, that she was dead in the back room, and that he was either going to get a bigger weapon to come fight us with, or he was trying to leave out the back. So we kicked the door in and go in, and were thankfully able to disarm him. Turns out the wife comes out of the back bedroom unscathed. She's not harmed at all. Not even a paper cut. He'd been in the bathtub trying to kill himself because he was upset about them fighting. And in just a matter of seconds, I went from 100% convinced to he was a murderer, he just killed his wife, to, oh, Jesus, well, okay, I guess not. Total perspective change, just a couple of facts. And it happened in a couple of seconds. The same thing that will happen with these police scenarios when you find out the full story. And we don't find out the full story typically because police officers don't talk because they're accountable to a judicial system that has to run its course first, and then an internal system. Now, all this is to say that I'm not advocating that we just shoot anybody that provides the police a problem. Like, oh, you're a problem with the police? Well, F you. We're going to shoot you then. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying any 13-year-old with a BB gun should be shot. I'm saying there are a lot more facts that most people don't know. And if you go around and ask people, what police shootings do you remember? They can usually name a couple, and they can usually tell you a couple facts that they heard from the news media, and they're usually not the officer's side, and they're usually anti-law enforcement sentiment, like, well, how could you shoot a 13-year-old with a BB gun? And with what I'm doing through podcasts, articles, social media, and my book, From Boy to Blue, Becoming One of America's Finest, is to try to show you that other perspective so that you have some tools when a police situation happens and you can say, I need more information. We're not going to hear the police's side for several months. You can ask questions of yourself and or look for them online. What led to this escalation? Why does a traffic stop end up in a shooting? Am I participating? Am I picturing myself or my family in these situations? Was there non-compliance that led to this escalation of force? Almost always you're going to find the answer is yes. And that doesn't make what happened any less of a tragedy, but what it does do is make the police and their actions more understandable and creates less resistance between you and the police officers for when you need them. And that's important because when you need them, and you guys need each other, you need to be able to trust each other. All right. Hope you took something away from this. I am Steve Warneke. Thanks for listening. Hope you'll pick up your copy of From Boy to Blue at Amazon or on Kindle. And hope you'll see us over at stevewarneke.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.